I'm Essence Harden. I'm the visual arts curator at the California African American Museum, and I'm here with Martine Syms for
Hello.
Hi. For the screening of The African Desperate, and I'm really excited to be here. I've been in conversation with Martine on other occasions, and so it's always nice to talk with a friend in front of other people about their art. So I have a series of questions, and they're kind of spatially all over the place, but it's fun for me to ask questions in that way. And I think, after they wrap up, around 30 minutes, we'll open it up to the audience to ask some questions, and then we'll kind of wrap up the whole thing, if that sounds groovy with you. So on this fourth watch of the film, I was really thinking about how this movie is sort of this, it's coming of age film, but it's also this humor college/horror film to me sometimes. And the pacing of it, the editing, the sort of sound landscape does a lot of that affect. And also, the landscape, it's rural, there's minimal black people, there's all these moments of tension with Palace. And I was hoping you can talk a little bit more about your sense of genre when you were making this film, because you're a person who generally kind of works outside of genre and like bends apart genres, but there's genre happening here, and because it's a feature film, it's also going to be categorized in this way.
I think my influences and sort of some of the references that me and the crew were looking at ranged, from something like Diamond. A keystone for her in terms of performance was like Opening Night, like Jenna Rollins in Opening Night, the Cassavetes film. Another one that we were kind of thinking about, I was really interested in making a film that was 24 hours. That was kind of a conceit really early, so something like Friday or Lahain or Run Lola Run, or something where you already have this structure, because that gives you a lot of tension. If you as a viewer know, like, Debo's gonna beat his ass if it's not done this time. And so I think I went into it like that and just wanting to play, I guess, with the format and thinking about this sort of palatial space of upstate New York as, being somewhere that contained a lot of like dis-ease, and that anywhere that is sort of that nice, where does the tension get put? But then we had a lot of fun while we were shooting, so there were things that we knew we wanted to do. Like, I think something that I forget about when I'm watching it, like sometimes I call it like a comedy about depression. And I think that sometimes, though, it is like pretty of a drug trip movie too, that I can forget that was a big part of it. Like, that we were like looking at all kinds of stuff, but like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas was like one, where I was like thinking about some of the elements of wanting to heighten just people's like really in a really sensory way, like how the color changed or how the sound changed, or how someone's vision was altered. And I think Palace was always supposed to be kind of being watched, so that is where some of the maybe horror feeling comes in.
Yeah, it's also hella funny, and so when you're watching the movie, you're like cracking up at random moments of it, and I think the sound cues like help with that as well. And Palace doing the like tutorial for makeup and hair is like really funny, and Diamond's such a good actress. And I think like a lot of your work, when it's being written about, kind of often has this kind of serious tone from critics or art writers. But I'm like, you're really funny and goofy, and the movie like does really kind of showcase that. It's like it's not all horror all the time, but
I mean, I think I love humor and playing with it, and there was no, even when we were writing it, it was like Rock and I were kind of like trying to make each other laugh, like, because we were writing pages back to back, so it would be like, okay, what can I put in here that's just gonna make this other person laugh, and vice versa. And the same thing the idea for the movie really came about through a conversation I was just having with Diamond, where we were kind of joking around, and she said she had visited me Palace in a way is supposed to be like a combination of the two of us as a character. And she had visited me when I was in school, and she was just like joking about a situation up there, and she was like, God, I don't know what I would have done if I was there. And that instantly I got all these ideas about what, because it would be funny, just thinking about her. So it was really written for her, what would make us laugh. And then I think everyone who joined, like one of my really good friends was our production designer. She'd also gone to the program. And so we started to do things like put like Easter eggs in different scenes, like there's like banana peels all throughout, like stuff like that. But no one really know those things. It was just like stuff we were doing to make each other laugh.
That's awesome. There's banana peels throughout. I would think after the fourth time I would see that.
Maybe like the
I'll watch it for the fifth
time.
Yeah, it's going to come through. That is a really wonderful point, because in other interviews, and then even when we have talked, like, and in the film itself, Fred Moden's mentioned and the Undercommons is mentioned, and that's the book he wrote with Stefano Harney. And what you're talking about is this sort of ethos about who you are in terms of being an artist and just a person in relationship to collaboration. And there's this idea in the book around study, and it's a quote that I really like and I come back to because the book is about Black studies in this broad spectrum way. And bear with me for quoting Fred Moden for 1 second.
Please, we love Fred Moden.
But it's to say that study is what you do with other people. It's talking and walking around with other people, working, dancing, suffering, some irreducible convergence of all three, held under the name of speculative practice. And this feels really poignant to how you make work, because as you just said, you Rocket and you have been longtime collaborators, Diamond and you have been longtime collaborators. Obviously Diamond stars in the film, but you and Rocket co-wrote it. Natalie James, who did the music supervision, and then Colin Self and Ben Babbitt and Unsister for the actual composition in the film, the music composition. And so the film just kind of feels that kind of organic nature. I'm like, I can't tell where the script is and where the editing is sometimes, and if it's just y'all kind of, improving together on set. But I wanted to hear more about how you kind of pitched this idea to all these people who you've been working with in various projects. And I know some of that story, but because collaboration and this kind of idea of study as being like an ethos for your practice, can you talk to us more about how, you kind of came to African Desperate?
Sure. Well, I love that quote also. And there's a part just before it where he kind of they're using Marvin Gaye's what's going on as like the maybe metaphor where it goes from many voices to the singing voice as sort of like a way of thinking about working with people, like where sometimes how that transition is sort of seamless. And I feel like this project was very seamless in a lot of ways. Like, it was obviously low budget and there was a lot of constraints, and in that there were challenges, but all in all it was fairly quick. Like Rocket, as you said, I'd been working with for a while, and we were writing another screenplay that we had been applying to stuff for. So we were already in the process of fundraising, and then when I got this idea, which was a much more manageable project, as soon as Diamond said that kind of just joke, I was like, oh no, wait, that's it though. I can do that. Because I've been wanting to make another feature. I made a feature in 2017, Instant Sweaters and Ice, that's less narrative. That was part of a show I had at MoMA, and that was a way different process. It was me and an actress driving around in a car for 2 weeks, basically, someone I did not know. I've become very close to since, and only later did I realize that was a completely insane thing to ask someone you don't know what to do with you. She was like, yeah, you just were you want to do that? But that's my superpower, is I have no shame, really. So we got some grants, and then I had been working with this producer who was kind of a more Hollywood producer, who was okay, so now you're gonna make like a 3-minute short with all this money you got. And I was like, fuck that. I'm about to make a feature. And I just went to New York. I wrote the script over the holidays, like the first draft. And my studio was like on a break. And then we came back, Rocket started working on it. Then I went to New York I'd worked with Impact, which is a production residency based in Troy. At RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and I'd worked with them previously on a few projects, so I basically asked if they would help me make the project, and I knew if Vic Brooks, who's the curator there, was in, Rocket was in, Daisy Zhou, who's the DP, was in. I was like, okay, we're good, Diamond's in, we're fine. We're gonna figure it out. And everyone else kind of was very eager to participate, and I think it is all people I've known for a long time and a lot of friends and people kind of in and outside of art and film. And yeah, it was really fluid, honestly. Yeah, even some of the people who were, asked, like Aaron Bobrow, who plays Ezra, was someone I knew less well, but I had known for a while, who's not an actor, that I asked to be in this and really was down, So, yeah, I feel grateful for everybody's trust. It was a lot of trust.
Yeah. I feel like you feel that trust because that's part of the interplay and why it feels organic. And I'm like, is this scripted or did
It's very scripted, though.
That's awesome.
The book is for sale in the bookstore. No, well, we did publish the script. Rocket's a poet, and I have an engagement with poetry, I'll say it that way. And so we wanted to, there's a lot of things in the script that you wouldn't put in like a normal script. And so we worked with a poetry press basically to release it as a text. And it is pretty scripted just because that's the way I like to work. I'm very much a writer in that way. And we did not have a lot of time. So it was like it was a way for like us to structure things for everyone. We just all know what's happening. And then there were opportunities for us to improvise. And there was also some reshooting that had to be done because stuff just wasn't working when we actually went to do it. But
I like that feeling that I can't tell where the line is, and that feels really natural and good artistry, and yeah. But language, because you talked about it briefly, does really feel like this other character in the film. Like the opening scene sets up the arrangement that we then are kind of dealing with throughout the film. Diamond's tension in this place, but the sort of academic jargon and just the play with language, it's like so apt and spot on. I did not get an MFA, but I did go to graduate school, and I was like, this is exactly it. And I was like, oh, the actual, the text feels like another fully fleshed out character persona in the film itself. And so you talked kind of for a second here about, how you write, you're a writer, and this relationship to poetics, but can you flesh that out just a little bit more?
Yeah, I wanted, one key texture for me was people's voices. I feel like it's a joke sort of on discourse, but also that being in a program is very discursive, as in people are constantly talking, especially something that's crit based. It's just your whole thing is I'm talking about your work, you're talking about my work, and now someone comes in and talks about their work, and then I say, oh, I think this, and also even to the mention of undercommons, which is also a thing I love about working with actors, is then they bring something else to the text, because we did that one a few times, and each delivery kind of changes. The film's supposed to sort of be 2017, it's a light period, but the way she's undercommons came out 2015, and there's just sort of a way of oh, have you read that? Yeah, I read it a while ago, when it came out, you're a little late. But there's other ways there's other takes where it was sort of the meaning changed slightly, how it was said, but we wrote that. I knew that was a scene, and I had sort of sketched it out, but we wrote that scene after we had the rest of the film written. Like we came back to the first scene so we could kind of tie it to like try to weave everything together that was going to happen, but also set it up for someone who wasn't familiar with that kind of a critique based. It is pretty niche to arts education. And so I liked the idea of just like dumping the person in. If you've never heard of any of that stuff, some people are like, yeah, like what are they talking about? But that's kind of part of it, is like wanting it to be sort of obtuse, but also have these different archetypes play out through how they're talking about work, how they're talking about her work, and just kind of get a sense of like, this is her last day, so she's been dealing with this for a long time. I wanted that to be kind of where we started. At the end, also, I liked the idea that in most movies you end at like graduation, you know? It's like they've gone through all this stuff, and then, okay, we graduated, we made it. And I liked the idea of starting at that point, so that the film is really just this day of transition.
Yeah, and it's like also not graduation, it's the critique, and it's actually when school wraps up.
Yeah, it's like the final.
Academically, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, when does graduation even happen? Like,
I didn't go to mine.
Nor I.
I was like, I'm done.
Exactly, I'm getting out of here.
Send me the papers.
There's these 2 points that I was like trying to see like what had been written since I've last talked with you about the film, and there's these points that I haven't really seen brought up. One is the sort of particulars and the significance in casting Diamond as Palace, this brown skin, Midwestern Chicago black girl existing in this and thriving in this neoliberal white enclave in upstate New York. And then the other thing I haven't really seen much about was sort of the sexual encounter between Palace and Ezra in the car. And those are 2 points I'm like deeply interested in, and we've like talked off record about it a lot, but I wanted to talk in person about it. And so to start with the first point, and I can mention the second point again, but what I'm really intrigued by with Palace is like a protagonist being that kind of black femme visual language, and the way that she's darker skinned, like her face and body do not generally look like the protagonist for an indie art film, which would even have a black woman like character subject. And so, colorism has really veiled possibilities around imagining black women characters. And so you do this thing where you're like, no, she's from Chicago, she's just a regular black girl. And I'm really interested in that move. I know that Diamond's your friend, but I want you to kind of unpack that.
I'm like,
what's she gonna say?
Yeah. I don't know. It was just really like obvious to me. Both of us love film. Like we're both such like film nerds, and one goal, I sort of wanted to make something in a way that like a teenage me would have been into. Like it'd be like, okay, first of all, a lot of the way the film was made was like as if it was 1996 to begin with. Like people don't make indie films like that. They don't just like go fundraise. And we were like joking about that. We were like passing out flyers like, hey, you want to be in our film? We're shooting down the street tomorrow. There's a party scene. You just show up. But that's kind of how we made it. And so in some ways there was a bit of like, like casting ourselves into that kind of filmmaking and history. And there's, I think Arthur Jafe said one time, like, black cinema is a series of one-offs. And I like the idea of like trying to keep the continuity with these other one-offs, like have something be singular, have something I hadn't seen. We kept being like, our goal is to see like a Palace Halloween costume, like we want somebody to dress up, like have that kind of like meaning to someone that like, okay, yeah, that like you could go to art school, you could be an artist, you can perform in this world and have that visibility outside of kind of an art world context, like something that could be more subversive and go places because I feel like a lot of people, especially a lot of young people, have been seeing the film all over the world, which was really fun to me. And so I think that was one thing. And also just a lot of times if there's black people doing drugs, they like go to jail. That has not been my experience. And not that I've ever done drugs. But I wanted also just to like bring some levity to that, like show kind of more like recreational side. That's not so institutional or like The Wire feeling. And Diamond and I always call ourselves first generation suburbs. My parents grew up in very intense projects in the Midwest, and so I do think there is like this different culture that I have that's a blend of those two things. And so that was one part of that. And her being an object of desire, and a desiring subject as well. Yeah, it was really important to me. It was supposed to be cuter. If you do read the script, it's a lot cuter. Like, it was more like, we're making a movie. And I wanted to make this kind of like fake rom-com part, like when they're at the dance. And we kept joking that she was like a Disney Channel, like, hey. Sure. like that was sort of what was making us laugh about it. Even though even one of our PAs on set, when we were like shooting the dancing scene, he kept being like, oh my God, she's so happy. And we were like, Josh, what? It's a joke. It's parody. But I feel like in some ways, there's two things that I was kind of thinking about. One was that I wanted her to have this kind of parallel to her relationship to the art world, I guess, in a way. That there's some, in this case, person who's like, wants her, and she likes the attention, but she's conflicted about it. There's something about the attention that she doesn't like as well. And I also, I mean, in my kind of notes, I have these really detailed, like, director's notes I sent everybody. There's a thing that my friend Lauren, who was a production designer, Lauren Anderson, she's also a really incredible artist, she calls lake effect, because we went to school in Chicago. There's a big lake. And it's like the effect of being in proximity to somebody that you would never, ever, ever like sleep with or have any like feelings towards if you were in another situation. But because of the situation and like you keep seeing that person, you're like, I think I'm in love with them, or I think I like them. And so we were calling that lake effect, and I just like that phenomenon. It happens at residencies all the time, you know, where people like cheat on their spouses. It happened at Bard a lot. There's a lot of people falling in love. So I wanted a lake effect romance. It felt like there needed to be at least one.
You did it?
Yeah.
It was giving that, for sure.
So that's also why the spell is kind of broken in the morning. You're like, wait, what?
What the fuck?
Why am I with you? It's weird.
Get out.
Yeah.
You talked here just right now about audience and the distribution of this film, and I know that we're in MOCA and we're in a museum, but it's also, you know, been available in various different, like, various venues that are movie screening houses, right? Like movie houses. You were talking about Alamo Draft House, which is where it was screening for a little bit, and it's on Mubi. Like, there's all these ways to access the film, and I know that's just been like a really important aspect to making this work for you in terms of how people are able to view it and who's able to view it. I want you to kind of like talk just about that point, and if those different audiences have somehow impacted or made you think differently about the work.
Well, that was important to me with making the film in general. That was kind of like the film I made before. I didn't really do any like festival strategy. I didn't like talk to anyone about it. I just like made it, and then it was for an exhibition. I did do this one festival. So there's all these like cul-de-sacs if you do like film festivals, basically, if you do one and then you can't do any others. I didn't know about any of that with the film I made in 2017, so I got invited to a festival in Toronto, and I was like, oh, sure, I'll do it. And then like 2 weeks later, I got invited to be in TIFF, and I was like, oh, I didn't know I couldn't do both. And so my screenings of Incense, Sweaters, and Ice were pretty limited in North America. In Europe, it did get a theatrical run and sort of played there in the UK. And so I went into this one really wanting people to see it more, because outside of a handful of screenings, Incense, Sweaters, and Ice just didn't get screened a lot, and I felt that was just it was just something I wanted to do differently this time. So that was kind of a goal from the outset, was like, must get distribution. And so that informed like sort of every step of putting it together. And I mean, yeah, I've gotten a film audience is just a much different audience, you know? Like, I've heard a lot of things. Some I were like, okay, cool. Some I was like, wish I hadn't heard that. Mostly positive though. But it's like it's a weird thing to like watch with people. I didn't do it tonight, but I've done it at some of the screenings. Yeah. And it's a much different feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, you're on the big screen with everyone.
Yeah, and like what things people laugh at, or what just like the moments, like you feel it in a different way. Like the first screening that I sat through with an audience, it was intense for me. I got up midway. I was like, this is too much information. Like, honestly, it was a lot of information.
That's fair. That seems intense and hard.
But it's been cute. A lot of students come up to me afterwards who are in art school and are like, oh my God, second year at Cooper, or I'm going to Wesleyan, you know, whatever. Like, I'm at Vassar right now. Like, even when I've played it in, I played it in Cayman Islands randomly.
Nice.
But somebody was like, I think she was going to Emerson maybe. But even there, so I feel like that's always fun. And yeah, with the movie sort of has this like college group that they've been doing screenings with. And I don't know, I've also just heard from a lot of people who said similar things to what you've said about they didn't go to art school, but they did this experience. And I think that what I was wanting, I was mostly using that experience because it's one I had and it's close to me, but I felt like people could relate to it. And at this point in time, there was enough of an interest in art, like in the sense that friends who are not in art will ask me if I can get them tickets to Freeze, and I'm like, it's not Coachella, it's really not like that. But sure, if you want to come, yeah. I'll try to get you a ticket. So I felt like, okay, people are interested. And then there was also, you know, this period of time where there were all these articles that were like denigrating the MFA, that were like, you stupid idiot, why would you ever get this useless degree? And as someone who has them, I felt like, yeah, that'll be fun to talk about why you would, but also like there is no reason, and that's why you would.
Fair. Tight.
That's important to me.
Yeah, I'm really glad you made it.
Thank you.
I guess I have these like random questions. I was like, I wonder like Martine's favorite meal right now, because we're both Tauruses and we talk about food a lot. But what you were reading and what you're listening to. But I wanted to know, it's like last question, is the music that is chosen in terms of, I mean, what's composed I haven't talked to you about, and then the sound editing, and then sort of the choices that were made between you and Natalie for the soundtrack of the film. If you can kind of talk about compiling or thinking through how you wanted this film to sound specifically.
Well, on collaborators, editor was also Nicole Otero, who is a filmmaker and friend of mine, who I've edited a lot of stuff with, and so I feel like she's also very sound oriented and did some of the sound design as well. So I think we're always thinking about how I can like create transitions or put like, I'm very interested in the cut as like this kiss that you can just bring like any two things together. And so sound is like one of the ways that helps you be able to just go from here to there. And with the music supervision, Yeah, Natalie worked on it on the post side, also, as well as Tabitha Thorley Bangura, who's the creative director at NTS, and both of them are people I talk to about music constantly and have talked to about music for a long time. So Tabitha sort of set the structure, like she went through the script. I had some cues that were already in there, like one of the, it's like a Ferenz 18 song, the butt techno song that I wanted, because it sounded like, the second I heard that song, I was like, this sounds like the very end of a rave. And like, I think in the script, it's like, you know, when you're like, it's too dark, you can't find your friends anymore. Like, you're just still like, am I staying? Am I going? So I knew I wanted that song, so I know that one was written in the script. Then there was a couple others that one we got. I'm trying to think. Fall Out Boy was a later edition, inspired by Diamond. Mostly I think I just put in the script like shameful music. I just wanted something that's like you listen to in your studio, but you would never want anyone to like hear you listening to. And because they're sort of this like private public. So there were things like that I had already written in, and then Tabitha kind of went through this like arc, and then also thinking about the time period, and also thinking, again, about the community we're in, and kind of having a similar thing happen in the music. So like Klein, Laurel Halo's music is in it. Both of those are friends and people I feel like are peers. And Colin, the song that's in the opening credits, Colin, Diamond, and I made my first year at Bard. Like on campus, they came up. Colin was there with me, but then Diamond came up, and we made that song. So years later, it sort of fit. And then I'm trying to think. I don't know. So I sort of had notes in there, and then Tabitha took that and mapped that out, and then started to do the first part of like reaching out to everyone, and here's what our goals are, and breaking it down. And then Natalie worked as well to like find some alternates or figure out a lot of the artist management and relationship management with people.
Cool. You know, it's always such a complicated process to actually get music in a movie.
Yeah, I know a lot about music rights now, which I hope to never do again.
Thanks, Martine.
Thank you.
I think we have time for some amount of questions. Sure.
As an artist, how are you thinking about like the art that these characters are making? Like, is it inspired by people that, like, I don't know, like, it's more than a prop, right? So, like, putting yourself in that other person's like artistic practice, and like, what kind of weird like video work is this person making? Like, how did you think about that?
As like a storytelling and like contextual, also continuing to have like the archetypes, or have these like different types of people that you might see. I also taught in art schools for many years, most recently at CalArts. So I feel like I've been on all the sides of like arts education. And so I was thinking about it as like, some are like, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but I feel like if you're in an art program, there are recurring tropes that appear. And so I wanted to have some of those things, but then I also wanted to have, you know, like a character like Portia, whose work is like sort of soft sculpture and performance, and like someone like Aiden, who you're not really sure what their work is about, but they have so much gear, and they have like all the like technology you need. And so it's kind of like thinking about more like that, like the character, like like what environment is this person in. And then I also wanted to think that there's sort of a performative style to how they are in their studio, how they are with each other, and sort of like where those personas kind of are amplified because of the way that you are supposed to present your work, or maybe you start to feel like you are supposed to because of the way your peers are talking about it. But there's also a lot of jokes in people's art in there. And there are some references to people I went to school with, but only certain people would be able to get that. Like, someone I went to school with came up to me after screening and was like, "Is this person this?" I don't know.
So I know you mentioned earlier that like throughout the movie you included bananas, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things I noticed in the movie, it was with the Volvo, I noticed that there was a bumper sticker, and I noticed it appeared in 2 or 3 other shots. Is there any significance behind that, or was
Yeah,
it?
the bumper sticker says mental slavery, which is from Bob Marley's Redemption song, which is like one of those things that like you hear so much that you're like, oh, this song's so cheesy. But then at the same time you start listening to the lyrics again and you're like, damn, this song actually hits hard. But then it was more an image. Somebody was telling me a story about when they were in high school, there was someone they looked up to, kind of a kid they admired who had a mental slavery sticker, and this was in Sidedale, Louisiana. And they were like, oh, that's like the epitome of cool. And then I like the idea of a white person having a mental slavery sticker.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You approached people, how did they react to that, and were they willing to give you money for this film?
Well, I was applying to a grant, so it was partially grant funded and partially funded through my galleries and with production company and impact. So sort of put together in a variety. You know, it wasn't a traditional funding process, but I didn't anticipate. I never went into it thinking that. Like, I actually really wanted to make this film for like as much money as it needed to sort of fulfill the vision, so that I could have complete control over it, and there wasn't like anyone who could give me notes, basically. Because it was important for me to have this as like I had been basically with this other screenplay I had been writing, I had been in a packaging process after the first film that I made, and I wasn't liking that process. It was taking a long time. I felt like I was kind of getting feedback about, you know, changes that I just thought were like stupid. Like, I was right at that. It's not going to make a lot of sense, but like one thing was like, make the character like 19. What if she did this? Stuff like that. And I just felt like I wanted to make the film a different way. So I made this film with my sights set on fundraising for something else, basically. But that's a whole like swirl of convo.
Were there any challenges that you encountered when you actually started filming that you didn't really foresee happening, and how did you kind of work your way around those?
I mean, every day, all day long, there was something that happened. Like, yeah, like, I don't know. Yes, lots. I'm pretty familiar with being on set, though, and I feel like something always unexpected happens. It's the same thing like preparing for an exhibition. There's always something that's going to go wrong. You don't know what it is. You can't spend too much time worrying about what thing is going to go wrong. Just accept that something's going to go wrong. And I'm trying to think of some of the, I don't know. I'm trying to think of something that would have been really obvious. I mean, there was a whole thing we were supposed to shoot in Chicago that like just didn't happen at all. And I think I was pissed. I was bummed. I don't know. There was a thing with the cars. We borrowed 3 cars. I was borrowing 3 people's cars. And at one point, pretty immediately, people like we had assigned what the cars were, so there were different days we needed different ones. One we needed to be able to put a sticker on, one we couldn't touch, you know, like, and someone swapped the cars in a shot, and so, which meant that basically we had to rearrange all those, we had to like redo all those kind of arrangements. That was one that sucked, that also I felt like I knew was gonna happen, and I was like, you gotta tell somebody you gotta double, like say it again before they go shoot that. But I didn't. But that happened really early, so then from then on I was like, you actually know, like I'm tracking a lot of stuff that people aren't tracking, and just to trust that. So I would be like much more, from that point on I was just like, if anything pops into my head that's like, do they do the cars? Do we have a thing? Because also, it just reminded me, I did this shoot in South Africa one time where there was a whole scene that was going to be like soccer, like a football match. And I remember thinking, did anyone get a soccer ball? And I was like, no, that's so stupid. They got it. Somebody got it. No. So anytime something like that pops into my head, I'm like, turn to my AD and I'm like, do we have a thing? And that would be the best way to deal with it, is just know that like, you kind of like are so close to the project that there's things that you're thinking about that nobody else is. And that's kind of the job. But the things going wrong, all kinds of things. An extra brought her dog to set one day. I don't know why. The dog ran away. We were shooting in this like four block by 4 block abandoned IBM campus that had been empty since 2001. It was an impossible place to find a dog in. I don't know why you would bring your dog there. But that was a tough day. Not for me. But, you know, stuff like that. All kinds of things happen. Did y'all find the dog? We did. We did find the dog. He was like 30 miles away. But somebody said like not UP, like something with P and he'll find it. I don't remember. Again, I was preoccupied with everyone kept being like, there's a dog missing. The dog's missing. We found him. He's safe.
I think we can have one more question and then wrap it up. Oh, Diedrich.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm really curious. I can't stop thinking about what you said about drug use, right? Like that it was really important for you to have Black characters enjoying themselves without threat of jail or like violent, whatever. And I think my question is really, are there other moments like that in this film that you were like, that maybe aren't necessarily important to plot or like whatever, but like, I need characters doing this, I want to see this sort of scene? Or has this film made you thirsty for like another thing to happen?
I think in general, that's what drives a lot of my image making. It will be like a specific thing I want to see that I haven't seen. Because to a degree, I'm kind of like, I remember reading this thing where Larry David was like, I just never take photos because it's like, when am I going to take a photo of a sunset? I'm going to look at it again. And I do sort of feel that way about photos, even though I take photos. I'm like, what am I going to do with that? So I do try to be very like, I think in the beginning I was very like archival, where I would try to find, like, be like, I'm going to find an image of XYZ, and then that led to being like, oh, I haven't seen this thing. I'm going to try to shoot this specific thing. And this one, a lot of it, most of the film was that way, but I think it's more that there's a lot of things I would like that I'm thinking about for the future now.
Thanks, Martine.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Appreciate
everyone.
being here.